Welcome to another of my In Conversation masterclasses. We've been doing them for over a year now. I think Nick is probably my 15th, 16th, something like that. And I have had an enormous amount of fun, and we've had hundreds of people from all over the world attending them. I'm absolutely thrilled today to have Nicholas Boothman. Now, I met him, he and I can't remember when we met, but we know it was many moons ago, and I think it was in London. And I think it was because I was specializing in networking and writing about networking. And I had heard about your book, How to Make People Like You in 90 Seconds or Less. And I think I interviewed you in order to write an article about that for The Independent on Sunday. I think that may have been it. It was a long time ago. Who knows? We're both old and we can't remember everything anymore. But I know I met Nick, and I know I met his wife. Nick is British, as you will find out, but he now lives in Canada. I have been impressed with his work ever since I first read How to Make People Like You in 90 Seconds or Less, because he is really good at writing something simply, quickly, and effectively, and teaching you something that makes light bulbs go off all over the place. And I've got his latest book here. Oh, now I've got to remember, I told you so, How to Write a Saleable Book it's really difficult with these backgrounds. How to Write a Saleable Book in 10-minute Bursts of Madness. And I, who have been teaching people to do this for 20 years, have written notes and put stickers in because it's so useful, because you are the absolute genius at distilling a hell of a lot of information into very few easy to absorb words. So thank you. So I loved How to Make People Like You in 90 Seconds or Less. I love How to Write a Saleable Book in 10-minute Bursts of Madness. And I'm absolutely delighted to have a man here who would probably not have called himself a writer, because he spent the first 20 years of his life as a fashion photographer. But he is now very much a writer, an author, a speaker, a teacher, and he'll hate me to say it, and very successful. So thank you, Nick, and welcome.
Thank you, my pleasure. Can I at this point, look, I'm famous for interrupting and you have the power to mute me, but you know, I had this discussion recently with my students in my professional speaking class and in my writing and admin classes. And I said, look, don't kid yourselves if you think you're a writer or you think you're a speaker or whatever. I said, you're not. If you're like me, you're an inventor. That's all it is. A speech is an invention. A book is an invention. You just get a whole bunch of parts and stick them together and add a few, you know, special things that we're going to talk about. And I mean, this program's an invention. It's all an invention. So, you know, don't take yourself too seriously and say, oh, I'm a writer. No, you're not. You just invented a book. Unless, of course, it's fiction, in which case you are a writer. But I call what I do, and I suspect what you do, because I'm a fan of you. You came up with one of the best titles ever, fits all the criteria and then some. We'll talk about that if you want. But I forgot where I was going now. I'm good at going off.
Not being a writer. Not being a writer.
Yeah. No, it's just about being an inventor. But you know something? I've done this so many times, talking to maybe 5,000 or 6,000 people. Someone does something and I go off at a tangent and I go, oh shit, where was I? And nobody knows where I was. That's the best part.
But that's
anyway, no, but all I'm saying is, you know, you're an inventor. If you're writing a book, you know, I know what I was going to say. The genre I write is self-help fiction. That's what I write, self-help fiction.
Self-help fiction.
Make it interesting.
So why do you call it self-help fiction? See, we're going off piste already. I haven't got this on my list of questions. Why do you call it self-help fiction?
I knew this would happen when you sent me the questions. This isn't going to, but because it's a book or a speech for me is like a shish kebab. It has a hook and a point, the whole book, and then maybe each chapter. The bottom lines with any book or any speech are, what's the point? What's your point?
Yeah.
Because when you know your point, then all you got to do is prove it. That's what your book is. That's what your speech is. I'm just going to prove a point. But if you've got no point, people will know that within 15 seconds, 20 seconds, they want to be out of there. And so the stories in my book, instead of, look, when my students come, half the people that come to my courses really are there for therapy. because something's happened to them and think it's never happened to anybody else, or they've got over it and they want to tell everybody else. But the bottom line is nobody gives a flying ding dong about you except the people who know you. No one's going to. I'm talking about, because look, writing a book and selling a book are completely separate events. Anyone can write a book. It may not be very good, but anyone can write a book if they sit down for long enough. But if you can get the elements of a saleable book right before you write your book, then your book will move, seriously move, over to you.
Oh, so and thank you for going so much off piece that now I'm in a complete muddle. But I would like to come up with I would like to go back to a couple of the things that you've said. You've said that it's a shish kebab. So I'd just like to say, so for everyone,
right.
Everybody knows what a shish kebab is. I can't even say it now. A shish kebab is, it's a stick with lots of bits of meat or vegetables on. And so yes, I would absolutely agree. I call a book, I always say it's like a recipe. It's all the ingredients put in a certain order, and I say you have a pattern or a roadmap for every chapter. And actually, those are just the smaller chunks of the larger chunk, which is a chapter. And it is exactly like a shish kebab. And I love the fact that you've come up with something that is a hell of a lot easier for people to absorb than me saying it's a recipe or it's a roadmap or it's a list of ingredients. You just say shish kebab, and to me, immediately, I know what you mean.
Well, let me go a bit further then, because all the shish kebabs just about I ever ate when I lived all my years in Portugal. And a Portuguese shish kebab has a hook and a
Yes.
point.
Oh,
Okay.
do you know I hadn't worked that bit out?
The point runs through everything. Okay.
Ah,
So it has a hook. You have to get, if you can't hook, look, you can, we show you how to hook your audience or hook your reader
yeah.
in the first sentence. And keep their attention. But then it has, I put 3 chunks of steak and sizzle. Your steak is your facts and figures. Your sizzle are your real life stories that make it super interesting. In other words, show, don't tell. That's why, going full circle, that's why I call it self-help fiction, because the stories. I was saying that, people come in, they want to write their own life story and use their own. Nobody cares about your story. But if you can take a story that happened to you, as I do most of the stories in my books happen around the corner in the village, but I've moved them to Tangier, to Marblehead outside of Boston, to Dubai, and then you just rename, because you can't keep having, Margaret and Francis and Tony and Andy and all these waspy names. I got Salim and I got Fatima and I've got Marcel and I've got, Sugar Lump, whatever. And so people think, oh my God, this guy has moved around. That being said, my books are all based on a hell of a lot of research. It's not what I think.
Yeah.
For the first book, for How to Make People Like You, we looked at about 300 people who could very quickly, well, they're what you would call socially gifted. They could walk into a room and start yakking with everybody. And we looked at about 40 people who consistently messed up. And we looked for common threads, strategy elicitation, figure out what they're doing right. For my love book, which is a great book, How to Make Someone Fall in Love with You in 90 Minutes or Less, we talked to 2,400 couples who'd been together for more than 20 years and were still actively nuts about each other to figure out what was going on there. And there were some surprises, some great surprises.
That's interesting that you say we. So is there a whole team behind you? I'm not on my script at all here. Is there a whole team behind you? Who's we?
Me and Wendy. No, we have tons of people working
Yeah,
with
yeah.
us on our bookings and on, but at the essence, look, at the essence, it's me. Okay, and I'm fired by my wife of almost 50 years next year, and obviously, she's the most exciting person I've ever met. Keeps me on my toes, and inspires me to keep going forward. But it's you're great to look around at what other people are doing, and you also have to walk your talk. I mean, I was on a book tour once. Well, I've done many of them, but I was in some tiny place right in the beginning of my first book, and we were on some TV station. You have an escort that takes you around. We were at some TV station, 11 o'clock at night, and all the different writers have escorts with them, and there was one guy on before me, and he was doing this big book about vegan stuff, and his escort who knew my escort. The escorts are usually old ladies who are now living on their own, and they hope, you know, Frederick Forsyth's coming to town to drive around. They get me instead. But these escorts are talking to each other, and he's on there talking about how vegan lifestyle is. And she said, you know what this guy does all day long? He has me stop at McDonald's. He lives off Big Macs. You know, so you have to walk your talk. I mean, there are a lot of, but you know what? These phonies don't last long. They don't last long.
That's very funny. That is very funny. But it is. I think it's interesting that you say that it's fiction. You're being quite self-deprecating. You're saying that you're just an inventor, but you have had to have a good idea, and you do have to do the research. You have to research the market. But the other thing you have to do, and you do quite brilliantly, is come up with an excellent title. So tell us a bit about your tricks for coming up with a title. You say something about finding a title in a lift, but that's kind of a metaphor, I would imagine. So tell us about how you find a title.
I've got it in here. I think the elements of a killer title. Well, look, never mind. A killer title. If I'm talking self-help, all right, or personal development, whatever you want to call it. There has to be a benefit in the title. My publisher in New York, Workman, the biggest privately owned publishing company in the United States, over 3,000 employees, they won't touch a self-help book if there's not a benefit in the title. Which brings me to A Career in a Suitcase. What a fantastic title. It's all there, a career. I mean, all the benefits are there. It's in a suitcase, so you're going to be moving around. It says it all. It's like you get a good title, and I've seen people say, this is a title, and someone says, well, what's it about? So they've got to start yakking. If you say A Career in a Suitcase, they go, oh, and they're straight in there. How to make people like you in 90 seconds or less. If anyone asks me what that's all about, I'm going to walk away and talk to somebody else. Are you kidding? You can't figure that out? So it needs to have a benefit in the title. It needs to be catchy. And look, I'm talking about, I don't know if your students are just writing for themselves or for their families or whatever. I'm talking about selling millions of books. Okay, I'm over 4 million. I'm way over 4 million right now. But you need a benefit in the title, and you have to understand. I asked my students, who's your primary reader? And they'll say, oh, you know, women who want to bake chocolate cakes, or guys who want to build kits. I said, no, your primary reader are book bloggers, television segment producers, drive time radio producers, magazine editors, book reviewers. Because if you can't make your title sticky enough to stay in their fingers, they're not going to write about you or talk about you, so no one's going to know about you. When I did Like You, you'd find, I've got the cuttings, my publisher used to cut, how to make people like you 96 less at the office party, how to make people like you 96 over the holiday season, over the summer. They just take, so that's another element of the title. Like Career in a Suitcase for women, Career in a Suitcase for teenagers. You know, you absolutely nailed it. It does it all. It's all there. And that's why a title is so important. Plus, look, some of this is also a little bit of, I changed what really happened around. It's all really happened, but I got on my first book, when I first came up with the title, How to Make People Like You in 90 Seconds or Less, I met socially a woman who's a publisher. I knew nothing about the business. I said, can I come and see you? I phoned her up. She said, oh, all right. I went in there and I said, I'm doing this book called How to Make People Like You in 90 Seconds or Less. She said, hang on. She went in the other room, came back about 2 minutes later. She said, this is my acquisitions editor. We'd like to buy the world rights. I said, I haven't written it yet. She said, don't worry about that. We can take care of that. And it went on from there. And it was eventually, but however, the same with when I eventually ended up with Workman, I told them the title, what it was more or less all about. And I left their office with a 6-figure advance in US dollars. It's the title.
Why? You think it's just the title? It must have been a lot more than that.
It's the Peter Workman said, it's the promise. It's the promise. It's a clever idea. And look, I'm not wishing to. Here's what I tell my students: the absolute basics, apart from the fact you have to have a point and prove it with your speech or your book, is that let's say if you're writing a book, you have to have a hot topic. It has to be something that's hot. It could be finance, it could be health, it could be retirement, it could be whatever. But you have to have, and this is what we're talking about now, you have to have a fresh approach. If you have no fresh approach, nobody cares. Look, on your questions, you said, I want to talk about writing madly or 10-second bursts of madness. That's the fresh approach I brought to this whole book. You wanted to talk about that. When I did my love book, I talked about, I invented the concept of matched opposites. And people say, oh, we want to interview you to talk about matched opposites. When I wrote Like You, I talked about rapport by design. Oh, we want to talk to you about rapport by design. That's the fresh approach. And writing madly is the fresh approach. 10-second bursts of madness. That's different to everybody else. So you need a point. You need to have a hot topic. To figure out your hot topic. In fact, I've just been doing it myself last night. I figured out with my new book, I wasn't sure of that I'd gone where. The point is, where would they put this book in the bookstore?
Very important.
Yeah, just for your own knowledge. So that's the topic. Would it go in relationships? Would it go in poodle training? Would it go in, I don't know what, but if you can't, or if you say, oh, it goes everywhere. No, then it's not going in the bookstore. Or online or whatever. You have to be able to put your book into a category of topic.
Yeah. No, it's all fantastic stuff. I hope people, I really should do a transcript of this. So thank you very, very much. It's interesting. I'm going off piece slightly more. I want to talk about the 10-minute burst, but you keep talking about your students. So obviously you're teaching. So can you just share what you're teaching and how you're teaching it?
Yeah, well, I was approached, I don't know, 10 years ago now by a guy I'd been speaking for, and he said, I'm going to become a publisher. Do you want to work together? And I said, no, I'm not a business partner. You can pay me for everything. So I get paid very handsomely for 2 courses. One is how to write a saleable book in 10-minute bursts of madness, and the other one is Professional Speakers' Secrets.
Right.
This is actually the workbook, great big thing. And I'm not a teacher, but I just stand and do what I'm doing now. I give people, look, do this, and go and do it now. For example, with Saleable Book, we do the weekends. We've got one coming up in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time, where we get usually between about 25 and 40 people. And as I think you know, every single one of them writes a book in a weekend. We have nobody drops out because they do their homework first. The homework is hugely important. So I just tell them, this is, I'm not really answering your question. I'm not really a teacher, but I show them my invention and how to use it. Really, that's what it is.
But you're doing it on Zoom, and they're open to anyone. Is it, or are you doing them live?
No, I'm not doing live anymore. No. Well, we start the next live one in November somewhere, but we were doing them in Las Vegas about 6 times a year, and Austin, Texas the same, and Toronto the same. I kind of miss them now. I didn't in the beginning. I thought Zoom is awesome. We had 5,000 people on one call. I mean, you can't see them. You can only see half a dozen or so. But no, so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
you are.
I haven't really. I have nothing to do with getting bums in seats. That's all handled by, which is perfect. It's 2 hands clapping. I do my bit. He does his bit. He can't do my bit. I don't want to do his bit, but he works very hard with. I mean, Facebook ads like crazy, and we get people like you from all over the world.
Yeah.
And they do their homework, because if you don't do your homework, there's no way you can write the book, and you do that before you come to the event.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I wondered how you did that. So what are the 10-minute bursts of madness then? What can you get done in 10 minutes?
Well, we break chapters down. Look, I liken, again, another metaphor. I liken writing a book to crossing a stream on stepping stones. You have the bank where you're standing now, then you have 8 stepping stones across the stream, and then you have the far bank. On the bank where I am now, and you take your reader across the stream. So you tell them about what you know, how you came to be here, and blah, 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 blah. And in that's called the intro, and the outro, which is the far bank, you tell them where you've been, where you're going to go from here. The steps going across the stream, we just break a chapter down into the meat and potatoes into 8 stages or 8 stepping stones. And on each stepping stone, we put a shish kebab. So and so look, so what the homework is they have to find their 8 chapters headings, which are logical steps. I use as an example, building a house. Well, you'd have to excavate, you'd have to find it, then you blah, blah, whatever. And then each of those chapter headings, we break into, or chapters rather, we break into 3 headings in the chapter. So if it was finding the land to build on, you'd have to be looking for a realtor, figuring out what appeals to you and what do you want from the community. Okay, let's say those were your 3 headings. Then each of those headings you break down into 3 subheadings. Fine, so what do I want for the community? Well, I want a pub, I want to do some good shopping, and I maybe want to know where the hospitals are. Okay, so that heading and the 3 subheadings make up a 10-minute burst of writing madly. And a 10-minute burst of writing madly means, and people get this by the second one they can do it. You have to write, and you're not allowed to stop writing. Stop writing or typing for 10 minutes. It's automatic writing, whatever you want to put. But you have to write about those things that you've just written down. So you're the expert. You got the knowledge, and you basically write until your subconscious sphincter bursts open and everything flies out from inside you. And look, you can write any old rubbish you want as long as you keep writing. And if you can't think of what to write, you put down, I can't think of what to write right now. It's driving me crazy. Everybody else seems to be writing. Oh, I know. Blah, 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 blah. And by the time you've done it 2 or 3 times, so what happens is in 30 10-minute bursts over a weekend, because there's 3 10-minute bursts per chapter, and they're only 10 minutes. So you're looking at 30 minutes a chapter for 10 chapters. And the average person gets, in the end, get down between 15 and 20,000 words, because they won't stop at the end. They go, oh my God, is that the time? You know, and we do some other things which really help them blossom, which I'm not going to tell you about, but blow people's minds. But in the end, that's what they've got. So I've likened it to, I'm on a farm. I live on a farm. Okay, and at Christmas we go into the woods and we get a Christmas tree. We talk very nicely. Look, you're a gorgeous tree. We're going to cut you down. You're going to make the family happy. Boom, bring it home. Then all you got to do is decorate it. It's the same with your book. But by the end of the weekend course, or the course you teach them, you have a first draft, and a first draft is a bit like the Christmas tree without the decorations on it.
Yeah,
then all you got to do is decorate it. And that's easy.
It's easy for some, but yes, that's all you've got to do. If only it were as simple as that. If only it were. But thank you, very helpful indeed. What I want to ask you now is that I know, because I've read your books and I've read your bio, that you're an NLP expert. Where does NLP come into all this process, or doesn't it?
Oh, well, it totally does. NLP is essentially, look, there's a lot of blah about NLP, and there's a lot of losers doing NLP, and a lot of good people too. But NLP is essentially how we use language to motivate or demotivate ourselves and others without realizing it. In other words, I mean, that's what my next book is about. It's about, you know, if you say, oh, I'm such a loser, well, your subconscious is listening. It's like, okay, boss, that's what you want. I'll fix that for you. You know, so it's how we use, and the same with other people. Oh, it's not, have you ever done this? You phone up tech support or something, and you're talking to them, and no, we can't help you. And I will say, oh, well, thanks anyway. Oh, it's not a problem. I say, not a problem for you. It's a problem for me. It's just the way we use language, and it can piss people off. So, and NLP also allows you to elicit strategy elicitation, because that's essentially why Bandler and Grinder invented it. So you can ask, you find people who are good at doing something. You can't just say, how do you do it? Say, I don't know, I just do it. And so, and then using NLP, you'll figure out, okay, so what's the very first thing that went through your mind when you thought about driving to the doctor? Well, I have to think of, where are my car keys? Okay, fine. So was that a picture? It was a picture. Okay, so when you make decisions, first you picture something. What's the very next thing? You say, oh, better make sure there's nothing in the driver. Okay, then you talk to yourself. What's the very next thing? Then I feel, you know, so you get these, and if you can find consistency, that everybody does the same pattern when they're faced with a certain situation, then you can tell other people, hey, this pattern works. This is how they do it. I know I'm not making it sound that simple, but it really, and the other reason I do it is because my publisher gave me media training with one of the best in New York. And she came and she sat down and she put a camera on and she said, okay, so do you have a PhD? I said, no, I don't have a PhD. She said, that's the soundbite. I said, oh shit. So I went and did NLP, and when she came back, she said, do you have a PhD? I said, no, I'm a master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming. She said, oh, that's pretty impressive. So, you know, again, it's all part of how to write a saleable book, getting the saleable elements right before you write the book.
So you have to make yourself saleable as well at the same time.
Well, today it's, look, when I was doing this, you weren't around to help me, people like me, and I figured it out for myself, as I'm sure you did.
I did. Yes.
You know, I look, I've been lucky. I've had 3 bestsellers, not just in English, in over 31 languages. In fact, I was sent something the other day from Brazil that convinced them in 90 seconds or less, my book. I had no clue about this. And it didn't tell me how many they sold, but it had 2,494 reviews on Amazon, Brazil, and Amazon reckoned between 1 in 100 and 1 in 200 people send in reviews. That's a lot of books.
That's a lot of books. So I hope that's appeared in your bank account.
You know what? But Joe, you know, that's something else. When I ask people, do you want, you know, who wants to write a book? And some hands go up and said, who needs to write? Who has to write a book? And some more hands said, you're the ones who'll succeed. I mean, the money is great. I didn't get in it for the money. I got in it because I'm passionate about human potential, and I go crazy when I see people standing in the way of other people who've got potential. Who do you think you are? Why are you doing that? You'll never be any good. Strangle them. You know what I mean? So the message for me is everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm most impressed with what you do. So what was I going to say? I was going to say that, do you know how many thousand words are in this?
I can guess probably 40.
40. So
maybe not. It was originally 96 pages when I first, because it was a workbook for a course.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know if you can really see because it's all ghosty, but Nick, can you hold yours up? Are you not as ghosty as me? You've got a background too. Yeah, it's not big. It's not a big book. It's not a big book, and it's also, if you look inside, it's quite, as my highlight on it, it's not got millions of words on the pages. So it's not that long, and I think a lot of people think that in order to write a book, you've got to write really long, you've got to write loads and loads, but you are really good at writing enough. And also, a lot of the things, and I said this in one of my posts today about you, they're so memorable. I mean, nobody will leave this call today and not remember shish kebab, I would imagine. And because you say you have these ideas that are really sticky, which I like, the titles are sticky, the ideas within it are sticky, which is great. But you've also had something else in your book that I used only last week, and somebody is here on this call who was part of me doing it for the first time, is you talk about it just now in what you do when you're teaching people how to write a chapter and get their 10-minute burst of madness. It's just the 3 words or the 3 topics. And I find that incredibly helpful, and I taught somebody to do that. So sorry, I stole it. I didn't ask you, but it was a really simple way to get people writing. When you just say, come up with 3 aspects of this thing and write. Yeah. And the thing is, when you're a features writer, because I've done a lot of features journalism, that's all you do is you speak to 3 people or come up with 3 spins on something. That's all you're doing. It's always this rule of 3, which makes it very manageable when you just think, I've only got to do 3.
Yeah, nobody wants to know all the details and all the, look, you know, if I have a strength, I make complicated concepts sound simple and interesting. That's the thing I came up with. And you know what? I spent half my life at school as a kid standing in the corridor because the teacher would say something. We'd all go, and I'd say blah, blah, blah. And they'd say, Nicky Boothman, go and stand in the corridor. I've told you not to do that. I remember one where they were talking about the square on the hypotenuse for Pythagoras theorem. And they're all going, the square. I said, looks like a ladder leaning against a wall. The ladder, the hypotenuse. Nicky Boothman, go and stand in the corridor. I've told you not to do that. You know, and that's what I do with my books. I take things which other people can make incredibly complicated, Well, you know what I'm talking about. You just said it.
Yes,
You do the
it's
same
very
thing.
helpful. The stepping stones are helpful. The shish kebab
Mm.
is really helpful. And the other thing is, and this must be the NLP bit, is they are really visual. Well, they are to me. The moment you reminded me that the shish kebab's got the hook and the point and the spot and the thread that runs through, then now that I will always remember that, and it is so incredibly helpful. So thank you for doing that. I would like to
My
say I
pleasure.
do the same thing. But when you come up with a concept like that that is so memorable, it is a complete gift. And so, are you not shooting yourself in the foot sharing some of this stuff here today?
You know, it's funny. I was going to say a minute ago, about 15 years ago, I got an email from somebody saying, just to let you know, we are putting out what would you call them back then? It was not a blog back then. It was a newsletter. And the title of this one is "Somebody's Stealing Nicholas Boothman's Work and They're Probably Stealing Yours." Okay, they put it out. They did some research online,
Mhm.
and then it was later they came back and said, "Look, we've had a lot of feedback on this, and we're actually doing it as an ebook." I couldn't find. I tried to find it, and they did, and they just look. My stuff, you're not stealing it. I put it out there. Look, if it can help somebody, help yourself. I came out of a speech in Jakarta once in an arena, and, and there was tables everywhere and hockey bags, and they'd emptied them. Man, there was videos of me doing this and me doing that, and someone reading my book. And they nicked everything. And I told my publicist, said, "Nick, just make sure they spelt your name right." And some of them didn't. But you know, but yeah, I won't go on because I know your time's limited. But it was very funny what happened with in the end with the people who'd been stealing my work in the States.
Mm.
Someone set up a whole course and published it online, and you'd pay like $1,900 to go in and take this course. And when I phoned them, I phoned them and said, "Look, I'm Nick Boothman, and I'm looking at your website, and some of this stuff looks rather." He said, "Yeah," and I said, "Well, you know, you can't really do that." He said, "Well, why not? You did it." I said, "What are you talking about? I did it." What I'd done when I wrote my second book, Peter Workman said, "Look, you can't go rehash book one in book two. You've got to come up with something different." So I rehashed book one, imagining I was sitting in a taxi cab driving around London as a 19-year-old with Francis Xavier Muldoon, who I also invented, as my guru, teaching me to do stuff. And it was like the cab was steamy, the traffic was crazy, and I was sitting on the jump seat, and my ass was sore, and we were hung. The whole thing, you know, we did it, and it was beautiful. It was totally believable. He said, "Well, you stole it from Francis Muldoon." I said, "I invented it. It's a device." It reads really well. I love reading that bit. Anyway.
Oh, well, it is fantastic. So you've sold millions of books. What do
Yeah.
you put that down to?
Um, ooh. First, having a fantastic publisher in New York. I mean, they have 28 publicists full-time on staff, and they
Okay, that
don't
helps.
stop. You know, look, Like You was January last year. Like You was the number one um, business communication book on Amazon.com. Uh, you
Gosh.
know, they just keep putting you out there, keeping things
Mm,
moving. That really, look, you have to deliver the goods. There's no doubt about it.
yeah,
And also a title which is Velcro. You know, that title sticks.
yes,
And the
yeah,
concepts, like you mentioned, that stick, your rapport by design, you know,
yeah.
all those crossing the stream, all those things.
Mm,
You have to have
yeah,
a fresh approach. Otherwise, why would anyone read you? Look, Dale Carnegie wrote an incredible book in 1936 called How to Win Friends and Influence People. He was my main competition. How could I possibly go up against that guy? Well, I added a time component. How to make people like you in 90 seconds or less.
yeah,
Ah, oh, this guy's interesting. Cheeky bugger. Let's get him
yeah.
on.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. So I'm going to go to my last question to say you are a master at short and sweet. Obviously, I don't think you are in person, mind you, but I think you are on the page. Um,
Let me
what
make
three
sure my wife's not listening to this.
what three tips would you give to one of the listeners or somebody listening to it later? Um, if they know something that other people want to learn, which is the basis of writing a how-to book, but don't have the confidence to write a book, what three things would you say to just help them dare to do it?
Well, I'll just tell you two things, and they're to do with confidence. Confident people aren't afraid of failure.
Hmm.
Confident people are not afraid of rejection. So deal with that.
Yeah.
Confidence means self-trust. If you don't
Mm,
trust yourself, you can't do it.
mm,
Confidence is such a
mm,
weird word. I'm not afraid of failure. I'm not afraid of making a fool of myself. I
mm,
don't take myself very seriously. And I've
mm,
noticed a big difference between, in every group, there's probably some people here who take themselves very seriously. So the world can
mm,
kind of hurt. And there are some who maybe, I don't know, maybe like you seem carefree and jolly. Um, who just don't take themselves so seriously. Look,
mm,
there's no such thing as failure. There's only feedback. There's no such thing as rejection. There's only selection. If you get rejected by someone, thank God I found out now. You know, I'm
mm.
going to move on. And rather, I saw in my love book. Look, most lousy relationships are between. Oh, what did I used to put it in a great way? And between a fragile person and an asshole. I can't remember how I actually put it. But I mean, the sensitive person just will crumble eventually, and it will go back. Move on.
Mm,
Invest
mm,
your beautiful emotions elsewhere.
mm, mm. Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm with you there. So I think we've come to the end. We're going to open to questions now. Thank you so much, Nick. There's been lots of such fascinating stuff there. Loads of takeaways. I really do recommend your books. And no, I'm not on commission. I think that they are great books. They're so readable. And if you want to write a book, you'll learn a lot by reading one of his. So thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Joe.
No, I mean it, and I'm known as Honest Joe. So
I believe that.
I
I
don't say
believe
things
that.
I don't say things I don't mean. So thank you very much. But before we stop the recording, the questions can come in through the chat, and we've had one from Maggie. She said it's been a super talk. Is there any danger of over researching? How do you know when you've done enough?
I don't know. Danger of over is just stop when you think you've. No, you look. If you've spoken to 5 people, you can spin that for a mile.
Hmm.
Five's enough. 4, 3. I don't know. I don't know what
Enough
you're
to
talking about.
get some.
I don't know what your topic is, so I don't know what your research is. But I mean, if you're researching acupuncture or, for I don't know, you're the expert. You determine it. You're the expert. You figure it out. I mean that with great respect.
I think that it's a good question, Maggie. I think that it depends what you want. So if you've got your 8 chapters and you might have two case studies in a chapter, then you're going to need to talk to 16 people. But if your market is, let's say, British women over 50, you need to talk to 16 people who are British and over 50. But if your market is global, you need to make sure that you speak to somebody from Brazil and somebody from Malaysia and that sort of thing. So you've got to make sure that your case studies match your target audience. If your goal with your book is to come up with statistics and be able to say 20% of all people who boil eggs do it in a copper saucepan, then you're going to have to talk to a lot of people so you get those statistics, because you can't just, I don't think
Yeah, you
just
know what?
talking to 20 people and then finding out 5 people use a copper saucepan isn't really enough. So it depends whether you want statistics or you want case studies. That's what I'd say.
Well, I, in fact, well, back in the day, if I was at a dinner or my kids had 20 friends around, I just throw the question out there and see what they said and make a few notes. Or I, I occasionally, I saw some kids the other day talking in a Tim Hortons donut shop, and they all looked really excited. I just wandered over and said, "Hey, can I talk to you guys?" And they looked at me like some weirdo. I said, and I kept my distance. I said, "Look, I live around the corner. I write books." So I'm just curious. You all seem very upbeat. How do you feel about talking to strangers? And then, basically, one said, "I don't mind." The girls, one said, "I don't talk to strangers," and 2 others said, "I don't know, never thought about it." I said, "Well, can we chat?" All right. And, so I had 4 incredible conversations, which they let me record. That's enough. That's enough as far as teenagers go, because I got so many points of view. It was
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Actually, that's a very interesting point. I just remember that I was writing, can't remember who I was writing for. I think it was the Weekly Telegraph, and they were going to sell an advert to Charbon L.A. Walker, the posh chocolate company. And they said that they wanted me to write an article about chocolates and gifts. So I walked into, I went into my husband's office because I was a journalist working from home, and I just talked to a few people around his office, and that was how I got my case studies for this piece.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to great lengths, you just need enough.
No, no. But sorry, I just thought of something. You asked me 3 bits of advice. And you made me think of it. We were saying the best advice for any writer is first just finish it, then make it great. That's absolutely. And you know what? You talk about research, but you're talking about an editor. You're answerable to an editor. Who will push you on your research and make sure you did it. With an editor doesn't do that. I find editors before I submit my times, but they just basically take what I say and make it look like a real person wrote it. But I only ever do that for one chapter, and then afterwards I write it myself. But it's just a fresh look on it. But you, an editor, say I interviewed 20 people, and that you didn't say this woman's full of it, you know. But
I think that's what I recommend. I recommend that people come to me after they've written one chapter, not after they've written the whole book. I really do recommend that. It's much better use of their time, my time, their money. One chapter, get the feedback. In fact, I say table of contents and one chapter. That's all they need.
Yeah, so page. I can tell if you can do it or not.
Well, look at this. Monty has said, this is the most fascinating talk ever. I was able to lay down an idea for a book just by listening. Super motivating. Thank you both. Where is Nicholas based? In Canada, because Monty's in Canada.
Really? Where's Monty based?
She's in, I'm going to get it wrong. Montreal, I think. You have to tell me if I'm wrong. I've forgotten. Go, Ontario.
Guelph. I'm about as far the other side of Toronto as you are on your side. I'm in a tiny little hamlet called Kendall. In fact, it's so small we call it an omelette. But it's just north of Port Hope.
Oh, interesting. Wow, so what an accolade. You can use that if I can't. Sue says, brilliant talk, thank you. Most books, I understand, have a title and a strap line. Or is it better to have the benefit in the title as opposed to the strap line?
Yeah, the title, because they can't play around with well, I call it the subhead. They can't play around with the subheading if someone's going to write articles about it. Let's say your local TV station wants to do how to connect in business in 90 seconds or less in rural areas, or convince them in 90 seconds or less in ice cream sales. If my subtitle is, well, that won't get. I'm all about selling books. You know, it's the title. Forget everything else. The title, and it's a nightmare to come up with. I just changed my title today of my new book after 6 weeks of banging away. I woke up last night and thought, where would this bloody book go in a bookstore? And the truth is, I'm not following my own advice, so I changed the title.
No, that's absolutely right. I always say you've got to have keywords in there, and if you haven't got the keywords that people will find in their search engines in the title, then they need to make sure that they are in the subtitle.
Sorry, yeah, absolutely. You know, another bit of advice is we make everybody on our courses, they swear, don't talk to anybody else about what you're doing because they won't understand. If you're up to chapter 3, you know, cousin Freddie says, "Oh, how's your book going?" Don't tell them, because they'll look at you or they'll do this, and you'll think, "Oh man, I've blown it." You'll get the feedback. Keep it to yourself till you finish your first draft, and just keep going till you finish your first draft. I've seen so many people who've made changes because of the feedback given by people who haven't got a freaking look. The creative process is not very attractive. You
Yeah,
know?
I know. I would agree that you shouldn't get feedback from people who are not your ideal reader, and you shouldn't get feedback. I never forget in Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, she talks about crazy makers, who are the people who actually they really wish they were writing a book, and they'll do everything in their power to sabotage you trying to do it. So
Yeah.
you've got to make sure that they are good. But I run how to write a book programs. They call it a book writing circle. I run one on how to write a how-to book and one on how to write a memoir, and they have 4 people in them, and the groups all feedback to each other, and because they're all ideal readers, and so that works extremely well. But I would agree that you have to be selective in who you get feedback from, and you have to make sure that the people giving you feedback, they care about your project enough to give you valid, useful advice, and it's not, they have no agenda of their own. I think that's
I agree that talking to people in your group, because they know what you're going through and they're going through the same thing and they know where you're at. I agree. But even people who love you madly, they may say, yeah, that's great when it's not.
Oh, I agree with
Um,
that.
you
Definitely.
know,
I agree.
I keep totally stum unless it's someone who's going through exactly the same thing with you, and they will
Mm,
know that
mm.
they, look, my second editor, my first editor was amazing, called Dollar Sally, but she died after the day after my first book, The Like You. I
Mm.
got another editor, and this editor, I would send with Workman, I'd send my manuscripts down. I don't know how many pages there were. They would come back. This is all FedEx then. It would come back with, like, it looked like a hedgehog. It had sticky notes all over it, and there was only one word throughout it, which was HUH exclamation mark question mark. Huh? She'd write things, huh, and put it on the side. Don't, which meant she didn't get it. Of course she got it, but the reader who we write to, who I write to 9-year-olds, so my books are all written to 9-year-olds. Look, if J.K. Rowling can get adults to read for 9-year-olds, that's the key. I mean, don't assume you can use jargon or anything. And my second rewrite was de-hurting the book. Just make sure that when I've said something, put it simple.
I
That's all.
agree. I write EH question mark A.
Yeah,
That's what I write. That's very
there you go.
Canadian, isn't it?
That's the Canadian way,
That's
eh?
the Canadian A. I say A. So we just got 2 more things here, and then we will turn the camera off. But Ginny says, a brilliant session, thank you. A favourite author of mine is Michael Morpurgo. His book, Singing for Mrs. Pettigrew, is lovely. It's a collection of stories and the story of their making. So that may be useful for people here. So thank you for that, Ginny. And Mariam has said, excellent advice. She's curious. Sounds to me like you may have gone through enough transitions early on to become this precise and confident, or were you always able to identify the perfect strategy and metaphors for them? So,
Yeah, the leaning against the wall. Since I was a kid, I can make pictures of make things simple.
yeah.
We all can. I just don't take things seriously.
Yeah. Yes, I think we all can. Sometimes it takes a while, but it's to do with confidence as well, I think. But thank you, Nick. I'm going to say goodbye now, but that doesn't mean you really go, because the people who are on the call get the benefit of being able to stay and ask you a few more questions just for another 10 or 15 minutes, if that's all right with you. But thank you
Perfect.
so much, Nick. This has been absolutely brilliant. I don't think I've ever had so many people at the end of a session saying, this was brilliant, this was the best ever, this was the best advice ever. So thank you so much for your incredible generosity, and I really look forward to talking to you again before too
Anytime. I love
long.
it. I love it. I'm a show off at heart.
Join the club. Maybe that's why I like you. Thank you very much indeed, Nick.